That's not what we started to teach, which was that every baby is, I don't know, let's not even put it on the birth certificate. That's what they wanted.
Were we teaching that?
Yes, we
When
were.
were we teaching that?
Teaching it. It was a law here in California. See,
To teach what?
Don't put sex on the birth certificate. We'll see.
Bill Maher is now spelling out why he officially done with the left, and it more shocking than expected. He sparred with progressives for years, but few thought he'd actually reach this point. Maher didn't pull any punches, claiming the left has lost its sense of clarity, and warning that it needs to act quickly if it wants to preserve its influence. Buckle up, because this one hits hard.
To admit this country is not as mature as it thinks it is. We elected Obama, and clearly the country freaked out. We're still living in that freak out. We are not as progressed and evolved and intelligent as we think we are, because we keep freaking out about this stuff.
Well,
you know?
The left freak out too. The left freaked out about a lot of too.
What did they freak out about?
Gender, race, parenthood, schools, homelessness, crime, the border, education. Like we stopped being a scientific people.
Maher opens by outlining why he reached a breaking point with the left, and he ends with a critique he says cuts deeper than the rest, that the left has drifted away from what he sees as scientific grounding. He argues that the debate has become muddled, with some treating biological and gender questions as if they can be resolved by assertion alone. To him, that signals a wider breakdown in logic and honest discussion. At some point, he suggests you have to recognize it as a departure from what he considers basic scientific principles.
It's not scientific.
But the left certainly stayed scientific.
No, they didn't.
Why not?
Because they think gender.
Maher makes it clear that, in his view, the left's intense focus on gender identity was a major factor in their election loss. He argues that the conversation was pushed far beyond what most Americans were asking for or comfortable with. Rather than centering on practical concerns like the economy, public safety, and education, he says the left poured energy into redefining biological terms and expecting widespread agreement. According to Maher, this overreach didn't just put off moderates, it pushed voters away altogether. By turning a niche cultural debate into a national priority, he believes the left helped create its own setback, and the election results reflected that.
That's not what we started to teach, which was that every baby is, I don't know, let's not even put it on the birth certificate. That's what they wanted.
Were we teaching that?
Yes, we were.
When were we teaching that?
Teaching it. It was a law here in California. See,
to teach what?
Don't put on the birth certificate. We'll see. Now, we've passed that period now.
I'm sorry, I don't remember that.
I know, because it doesn't get in the blue sky bubble.
Wait a minute, I'm not just on blue sky.
I really think that's a lot of it, is that some of this stuff doesn't get in to everybody's media.
According to this view, the left is now backing away from some of the very ideologies they once championed with full conviction. Many of the same voices that strongly promoted these ideas are suddenly acting as though they never took those stances at all. It's a strange shift, especially for anyone who remembers how forcefully gender identity debates were defended in recent years and how quickly dissenters were painted as adversaries. What once felt like a moral crusade is now something some are trying to quietly sidestep. With political momentum changing and public pushback growing, they appear to be distancing themselves from positions they previously promoted without hesitation.
Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland. But then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, homes. Meanwhile, Venezuela traded capitalism for Hugo Chavez's socialism for the 21st century, which turned out to be like socialism in the last century, or any century, a mess.
Maher adds another reason he stepped away from the left, what he sees as its growing affection for socialism. He argues that socialism isn't just flawed in theory, it's also a political liability. In his view, leaning into socialist policies doesn't energize the Democratic Party. it weighs it down and risks undermining whatever momentum it still has. Maher says Americans have watched how socialism has played out elsewhere and aren't eager to experiment with it at home. To him, the left continues promoting an ideology voters don't trust, and instead of adjusting to the backlash, they dig in deeper. He sees that as a path toward political self-sabotage.
It turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening.
Maher argues that New York seems convinced it can reinvent socialism, refine it, modernize it, and somehow make it work where every past attempt has failed. He says lawmakers act as though they've come up with a smarter, cleaner version of the ideology, one immune to the pitfalls seen elsewhere. But Maher isn't persuaded. In his view, New York is walking into the same pattern that many countries have experienced throughout history. No matter how it's presented, he says, socialism tends to bring the same issues: economic pressure, expanding government power, and a gradual erosion of individual freedom. To Maher, New York isn't creating a new chapter, it replaying an old one, with an ending that's been written time and time again.
For 66 years, Playboy magazine was also a fact of American life. Sears sold your father a mattress, and Playboy was what he hid under it. It was a surefire product. Pictures of tits and then 25 cartoons about Santa Claus. Plus real journalism. You could read an interview with Carter while enjoying photos of Bush. But then it started messing around with the formula. Like the Democratic Party, Playboy decided they didn't need straight men anymore.
Maher puts the responsibility for what he calls the woke virus directly on the Democratic Party. He argues that the party drifted away from the practical concerns of its core voters' jobs, safety, affordability, and basic stability, and instead dove headfirst into ideological battles most Americans never asked for. In Maher's view, Democrats became so preoccupied with gender identity debates that they treated them as the central issue of modern politics. He says this fixation didn't remain within political circles. It spread throughout American culture. Even major brands that once reflected mainstream values felt the shift. Maher points to Playboy as an example, saying it moved away from its original identity and began echoing the same woke themes dominating left-leaning politics. For Maher, this cultural drift shows how far the Democratic Party has moved from its roots. By prioritizing niche ideological causes over everyday concerns, he argues, they not only weakened themselves politically but also helped steer major American institutions in directions that alienated the very people they claimed to champion.
They put transgender women and gay men on the cover, and predictably sales, like their subscribers' penises, collapsed. The staff began using terms like intersectionality, positivity, and privileging, and in response, Playboy readers used terms like no thanks, get the out of here, and bye-bye. At one point, Playboy, yes, Playboy, even dropped the which is like cigar aficionado announcing, we're getting rid of the cigars. It went from entertainment for men to re-education for nobody, and enlightened their way to unpopularity. Meanwhile, Kim Kardashian posed for another magazine and broke the internet with her ass.
Maher argues that, much like the Democratic Party, any institution that enthusiastically embraced what he calls woke ideology eventually paid a serious price. In his view, adopting these cultural trends wasn't just a branding risk, it turned into a financial setback for many major companies. Brands that once dominated their markets suddenly found themselves alienating longtime customers, weakening their identities, and drifting away from the values that originally defined their success. According to Maher, the fallout for some was swift, revenues dipped, stock performance suffered, and loyal consumers walked away. He cites Playboy as an example, saying its attempt to reinvent itself through a more woke image drove away the audience that supported it for decades. He also points to Budweiser's highly publicized backlash after tying itself to contentious social messaging, calling it one of the most dramatic consumer reactions in recent memory. Even Sears, he argues, leaned into cultural signaling while losing sight of the fundamentals that once made it a retail giant. Maher's broader point is that these companies didn't simply make marketing missteps, they misread their customers entirely. By chasing ideological approval instead of serving the people who actually kept them in business, he says they invited the market consequences that followed.
Sometimes you gotta give the people what they want. But for some weird reason, it's apparently tempting for some people to not do that, because even Cracker Barrel recently decided that they felt a little embarrassed that it was so popular with bumpkins who salivate at the sight of an old wagon wheel screwed to the wall. So they changed it to this, which got them no new customers while pissing off the old ones. It reminded me of when Chuck Schumer said in 2016 that for every blue-collar Democrat we lose in Western Pennsylvania, we're going to pick up 2 moderate Republicans in the suburbs of Philly, Ohio, Illinois, and Wisconsin. Yeah, how'd that work out?
Maher argues that while Trump was out on the campaign trail offering voters clear, concrete proposals on the economy, national security, and job growth, the left was absorbed in an entirely different set of priorities. Instead of zeroing in on issues affecting everyday Americans, he says they focused on cultural topics such as gender identity and the inclusion of trans women in sports. Though these conversations mattered to some, Maher contends they felt disconnected from the immediate concerns of most voters, concerns like wages, rising crime, and the country's direction. According to Maher, this mismatch in priorities became a decisive factor in the election. By spotlighting abstract cultural debates rather than bread-and-butter issues, he believes the left unintentionally gave Trump a strategic advantage. The result, in his telling, was a sweeping victory that left many progressives stunned and searching for answers about why their message, one they viewed as morally and culturally important, failed to connect with the broader electorate. For Maher, the moment serves as a warning about what happens when a political movement loses touch with the concerns of everyday people.
At least Cracker Barrel had the sense to immediately say, oh, sorry, and put the sling blades back on the wall. Democrats don't seem to be doing that. They still seem to want to be that upscale store that impresses celebrities. Anybody remember Barney's? It was this store in New York that started in the 1920s, as a discount clothing joint on unfashionable, grimy 7th Avenue, a place where their customers, though working man, could get a decent suit at a very reasonable price. I remember going there in 1993 to get my wardrobe for a new show Comedy Central was launching called Politically Incorrect.
Maher argues that the Democratic National Committee should have taken a hard look at its recent setbacks and adjusted accordingly, learning from the missteps that cost them key elections. Instead, he says the party has doubled down on the very approaches that push voters away in the first place. To Maher, it's baffling. How could a party criticized for overemphasizing woke ideology respond by embracing an even more polarizing direction, such as socialism? From his viewpoint, it defies basic political logic. Rather than rebuilding trust with disillusioned voters, the party seems to be distancing itself even further from them. Maher suggests this isn't just a strategic error, it reflects a deeper disconnect from the everyday realities most Americans care about. While ordinary citizens are focused on jobs, inflation, and safety, he believes the DNC is increasingly preoccupied with ideological experiments that have limited mainstream appeal. To Maher, this signals a troubling pattern. Instead of learning from defeat, the left continues promoting policies that could lead to the same outcomes, further weakening its credibility and electoral prospects. In the end, Maher paints a stark picture. He argues that the left focus on woke culture, gender politics, and socialist-leaning ideas has alienated voters and undermined both the Democratic Party and major institutions. Meanwhile, Trump's emphasis on concrete, bread-and-butter issues resonated with voters, giving him an edge where the left faltered. Maher warns that unless the party shifts back toward practical policies and reconnects with its base, it risks repeating the same costly mistakes, leaving its future uncertain. And that brings us to the close of today's video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.